Hey everybody, it's Anna. So I wanted to share some thoughts. It wasn't really part of the message we had on Sunday, but it was part of an experience I had on Sunday. And I want to connect it to this Six of Pentacles. So this lesson has come up in a few ways for me this week. There was this experience we had on Sunday, a few different experiences I had on Sunday, as well as it's in our tarot story this week, and it's about the balance between giving and receiving. So my husband and I were out having lunch after church on Sunday, and a fella came up. He passed us by first and went to the table. Then he came back to our table, and he was asking for a resource, right? He was asking for a resource, and he was telling us that he ran out of gas. He needed gas money. He gave us a story, right? Which is, by the way, not true. Like, when you're in ministry or when you're in any kind of helping profession, you know there are some stories that always recur, and needing gas is a common story that recurs, right? But he's telling us this story, right? So both of us know he's not telling the truth about what his situation is, but we give him some money anyway. My husband gives him some money because my husband has learned long ago. We have learned long ago, like, not to take it personally if someone lies to you. If someone needs resource. We live in a world where needing resource is inherently considered like bad by our culture, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So that's the reason people don't tell the truth, is they're not safe to tell the truth. So the point is, my husband gave him some money. We're in this restaurant. This fellow goes with the money he just gave him straight up to the front and buys lunch, right? So that means he needed food, right? So I see that. I tell my husband, he just bought food. And my husband was like, oh, I'm so glad. So it was funny because we would have been very, very happy, much quicker to actually give him money if he just said he was hungry, because that was the truth. And I understand hunger. We understand the need to eat. That's a human need, right? So there was more compassion available for him when he got food than when he was telling us the story about needing gas money, because it was not true, right? So so we talked about that. I said, I wonder why he didn't just tell us he needed food. And I was contemplating this card, right? Because this card is about six is about harmony and balance. And this is the balance between giving and receiving, right? Which means the only way we create energy in the world is through living in the balance of giving and receiving. And all of us are better at one than the other. Like, we're either better at giving or we're better at receiving. The problem is, in our world, as I was just saying, we value the giving over the receiving. The giving is connected to action steps, which is connected to the masculine spiritual realm. And masculine just means we all have masculine and feminine energy. It's just the interchange of energy within ourselves, right? It's not men and women, although we connected that way improperly, I think. But masculine is connected to the mind. It's about the action steps we take in the world. So we live in a world that values masculine energy, doing things, making things happen, right? We don't value the feminine energy, which is the receiving energy. But the receiving energy, the feminine energy, is where magic enters the world. So receiving is where new stuff shows up, right? So we value action over receiving. So people who are better at receiving or in positions of receiving are devalued in our society. So this fella who needed resource, probably he's had many experiences of needing a resource, right? But instead of being valued for that and honored for that, he has learned that's not okay, right? He's going to be scrutinized and, which means he's not safe to be vulnerable in his receiving. Feminine energy is inherently vulnerable, okay? Because you're not guarding, you're just receiving whatever comes in, right? That it's inherently unguarded. So we need it to be unguarded for magic to flow in. But we have learned in our world that the feminine unguarded energy is not safe because the masculine energy in our world, in our systems, has taught us that is energy that's either not valuable and is exploitable. So this fella, he needs food. He's hungry for food. He doesn't feel safe to tell us that, so he comes up with a story. Now, he's still asking for resource, but he's going to ask it and cover it up with a story that maybe is more impressive or less vulnerable, because he's not telling the truth anymore, right? So the irony is that we did give him money, so it didn't end up costing him anything. Well, it cost us a little, right? Because The connection between us would have been more solid and more nurturing for both of us if he had felt free to tell us he was hungry, right? We would have very easily given him money, maybe given him more money, so he had money for like the next meal, right? Because he would have been saying, look, this is where I am. I'm in need. You have resource. This is the connection we can make, right? This connection doesn't work if either we feel obligated to give, like we're responsible to give, right? Or if we don't feel good to receive, right? Or we feel embarrassed or vulnerable to receive. So this is the situation we're all in all the time. If you're good at receiving, you have to be honest with it. If you're good at giving, you have to be in touch with your own receiving, so you're not judging the receiver. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm just saying, like, if you have a bias, you're gonna mess up this flow, right? I've said before that when I graduated seminary, in the graduation ceremony, they give you a hood. So part of your robe, your garb, is this hood, and it's called the beggar's hood. Because basically, if you go into ministry, you're agreeing to be a beggar. That's your agreement. You're now in a position of receiving. You're not out there building buildings or making money or creating wealth in the world. You're not being active. You are now in the position of the receiver. You're the one receiving, ideally, you're the one receiving grace, receiving love, and kind of channeling it into the world. So you're in a position of a beggar. You're receiving this, that thing goes into the world, and then the world, people around you, support you for that. They give you resource to keep you alive. So I feel like this is something my husband and I have been struggling with, or working with since we ever got married, which is the idea we're the beggars, and we really are. I mean, we do have resource. Don't get me wrong. Of course we have resource, but not our resource is very, very unpredictable. I mean, it really is. Like, there are people around us who are much better at managing their resources than we are, and they have savings and they have assets, and not us, man. We are living day to day. So I feel like we are kind of in this position of constantly feeling the vulnerability of needing to receive, right? And in our world, that vulnerability, we're taught that vulnerability is not a good thing. It's not good to be in need. But the spiritual teaching tells us you have to do both. You have to be good at both. So the tarot story this week is about receiving, right? That seems to be the challenge that's coming up, is learning how to really, receiving means recognizing yourself as the beloved, right? You receive not because you're clever, not because you're cute, not because you're effective. You receive because you are simply loved as you are. The benefit these beggars are bringing to this man is they give him a chance to access. This wealthy man is given an opportunity to access magic. There is magic in this receptive position, right? There's power. And as he engages it, as he gives his resource to this, he is receiving this grace and this magic, right? There's power in this connection, and it's expansive. This is not a status quo energy. This is expansive energy. So going back to this fella, I feel like an opportunity was lost. I'm not blaming him for this, because I feel like in our world, it is not safe to be vulnerable, to be a receiver and to be vulnerable. It is better to come up with a story that keeps you a little safer. So I'm not saying he made a mistake. I'm just saying afterwards, I thought, oh, how much better would it have been for us and for him, for all of us, if he had been able to say, look, I'm hungry. Maybe we would have asked him to join us for a meal. Maybe he could have sat down with us and ate. Maybe we could have had this sort of lovely connection that would benefit all of us in a way that was missed because he didn't feel safe in expressing his needs. So I want to say that this is something we want to look at. This is difficult. Being honest and vulnerable, whether you're a giver or a receiver, whether you tend to be one or the other, being vulnerable means you feel safe in the world, right? You have to feel safe to pull this off. You have to be safe enough to take the risk of being vulnerable. So maybe you don't feel totally safe, but you have to feel safe enough that you're willing to take the risk. I had a client one time who was single for a long time, and she'd had a relationship that had wounded her, and so part of her work was recovering from that. But part of it was she was a little bit interested, not a whole lot, a little bit interested in having another relationship. So one day she comes to me and she tells me, or in our meeting, she tells me that she's met somebody who she's really interested in. Like, suddenly she's very interested. And so I'm excited to hear this because the first time she's brought this up, right? So she's got this sort of desire, right? But how she followed up is she sent this person like a letter talking about their job, like talking about, because I think she had seen this person in their place of employment, offering them some ideas of how to how to expand their job. Anyway, so she tells me this is how she's reached out to this person, and I'm like, but don't you just want to go out for coffee with them? Like, don't you want to hang out with them? Isn't that what you really want? And she was like, well, yeah, but I didn't want to say that. I'm like, then they won't know. Like, if you don't say, hey, you seem really cool to me, I'd love to spend time with you, they don't know what you're asking for. And by the way, they didn't respond to that message, right? And, she was a little bit sad. She's like, oh, he didn't respond. I'm like, but he doesn't know what you want. You gave him some tips on how to expand his career. Like, he doesn't know that you like him, that you want to spend time with him. I said, try telling him you like it. And it was really hard for her. So I give her kudos because she was able to kind of push past that discomfort, the vulnerability of saying, this is what I really want. I really just want to meet you for coffee and see if there's any sparks here, right? But she did. And they're, as far as I think, they're still dating to this day, which has been several years, right? So it ended up being like her instincts were like, this is the person I want. I want to be able to communicate this, but I'm scared of being rejected. I'm scared of looking silly, whatever the fears are. And this fella, when he came to us and gave us the story about needing a resource, he was scared of being judged, scared of being rejected. And the other person did reject him, by the way. I mean, he had talked to somebody else and didn't get a good response. So he's used to being rejected. And that's why I say, yeah, I understand. The reason he wasn't honest is because he's expecting he's probably going to get rejected. The irony is this woman felt rejected too, but she didn't ask for what she wanted. When she asked for what she wanted, she got what she wanted. Like, she was able to say, this is what I want. And he was like, yes, let's do this, right? So the irony is when we are guarding ourselves, we're not making room for this to happen, right? We're kind of cutting off the magic. Whether that's we want something and we're not asking for it clearly, or we're disguising it as something else, or we're not even admitting we need anything, that's where you're kind of locked into that giving position and you're not letting yourself feel your needs at all. Either way, this balance point, this harmony, which is not just about harmony, it's about expansion, isn't possible. So for people who are living in status quo, like they're kind of doing the same thing every day, which is a lot of people, this would not be that much of a problem unless they're in crisis and they need more resource available. But for people who are kind of expanders, who are creative people, who are naturally expansive, you have to get good at this. This is not negotiable. Like, you cannot expand your own giving without expanding your own receiving. You can't be honest in your giving if you're not honest in your receiving. That means you have to help your mind. Whatever you got to do, if that means solving old wounds or coaching your mind through it, your mind has to get good at not guarding the intuition. It cannot be guarding you and you be available to this magic. Magic flows in from freedom and from feeling relaxed and released, right? You cannot put a guardrail up around it and expect it to work, at least not perfectly, maybe a little, maybe you get something going on, but your true expansion and the truth, if you are an expansive person, you're always going to keep expanding, which means this has to be solved sometime. Maybe you can grow to a point and you can still expand to a degree, but you're going to hit a spot where you need more resource. You've got to open to more resource. You have to ask for what you need and be clear about it and honest about it, because that's the only way you're going to get what you need, is by knowing what you need and asking for it in an honest way. And until we get good at that, there's a limit to what we can do in the world without exhausting ourselves. So yeah, those are my thoughts today. It doesn't particularly point to a Bible verse, but it is kind of a general rule, as giving and receiving come together. I would say that I think this does connect to the teachings, at least in the Christian text and other texts as well, about being the beloved. Oh, I know the passage it connects to is, don't worry about what you will eat or drink. Consider the lilies of the field. They neither sow nor work, sow or worry. And yet, the God surrounds them in glory. The idea of like, you are beloved, and we have to expand our agreement to that belovedness to receive more energy, so we can be a bigger blessing on the planet. And if you're an expander, that's what you're here for. So we have to solve this one. Okay, that's all I got for today. See you next time. Bye.